It's 5 o'clock. I'd like to call the special meeting of the Jacksonville Beach City Council to order. Madam Clerk, can I get a roll call?
Councilmember DeMott. Here. Golding. Here. Jansen.
Here.
Mesa.
Here.
Nichols.
Here.
Stokes.
Here.
Mayor Hoffman.
Here. Before we begin with our meeting agenda, I'd like to take a few moments to read a statement that I've prepared. First of all, I'd like to thank our staff leadership for their deft handling of the city's response yesterday. As we process the situation, the core values of the organization were never far from the surface. In particular, the commitment to communication, the C and EPIC team guided the city's statement being sent to all staff, council, media, and posted through our social media channels at the same time, ensuring a proactive and consistent message to all. I'm confident our staff will continue to be guided by those values as we move forward as a city. On a personal note, I want to say that I'm shocked, stunned, and disgusted by the allegations that are facing Mr. Ambrosio. It is in the hands of the legal system now, and I trust that justice will be served. No matter the outcome, many lives will be forever changed, and I know that none of us take lightly the role that we, as a city council, will have to play in the coming days, weeks, and months. Now it's up to us to chart our path forward, specifically with regards to Mr. Ambrosio's position, but also to ensure a continuity of legal services as we continue our ambitious program of work in service to our city and our citizens. I thank you all for your participation in this difficult conversation and for your service to the city of Jacksonville Beach. So as we begin to move through the agenda, I feel we probably have many people watching via our YouTube channel, so I'd like to read the background paragraph from the agenda memo. Background: the city attorney is one of two contractually appointed positions reporting directly to the city council. The city of Jacksonville Beach became aware of the arrest of the city attorney on March 24th, 2021. The arrest docket refers to one felony charge and one misdemeanor charge. It is unknown how these charges may preclude the city attorney from providing contractual legal services to the city, or whether ensuing legal proceedings will cloud his ability to perform. The arrest of the city attorney has several significant considerations and impacts. Most notably, formal actions will need to be taken by the council on impact to the city attorney's existing employment agreement, need for special legal counsel to provide guidance on this issue, and continuity of legal services for the organization. I will now ask City Manager Stathopoulos to go ahead and guide us through the agenda.
Thank you, Mayor. First, I'd like to point out that we do have a guest with us tonight, Eric Holzhauser, who is one of our labor attorneys that assists us here at the City of Jacksonville Beach. He is here specifically to provide some guidance on action item number 1. Action item number 1 is with regard to impact of the employment agreement. What I'd like to do is walk through what the action items are first and then circle back to action 1. So action item number 1 is with regards to the employment agreement for the city attorney. There's obviously a slew of options that are available to the city council as we move forward. We've tried to outline some of those for you here today in the agenda memo. I would note that there are some additional pieces of information that we changed the memo, I think, a few times internally today and with the council. One of the things that we would like to point out is that with regards to our charter language, there is a requirement for a 30-day notice period to be held with regards to change in employment status with that particular position, and we'll circle back around to that. The second action is with regards to the need to restrict the city attorney's access. As we go through this process, one of the things that we've discussed internally is what the disruption would be to have him back in the workplace at this point in time. So we are looking for action from the council in order to treat the individual like we would other individuals when there's an investigation or some other issue that's going on, where they are not allowed on city property or in the facilities or have contact with the employees until they are noticed by their supervisor to return to work or some other disposition occurs. Action 3 is with regards to need for special legal counsel. This is not a typical situation that an organization finds itself in, where we are dealing with this type of an issue. So we are looking for the city council to authorize us to enter into an additional legal agreement so that we can make sure we have the right legal representation to assist the city through this process, which will likely go on for a little bit of time. And the fourth is continuity of legal services. While we do have existing legal agreements with with different firms from around the area and across the state. Most of them, in some way, shape, or form, can provide us with the appropriate municipal legal services to keep the wheels of our organization moving. But there may be one or more additional agreements that we need in order to fill the gaps that we may have with not having a full-time city attorney on site. So we are looking for authorization to procure some additional legal services as well. So with that being said, going back to action one, impact of the employment agreement. The city attorney does have an employment agreement with the city of Jacksonville Beach. It was executed at his hiring in October of 2019. There's been one amendment to that agreement on his annual anniversary, which didn't materially change the terms and conditions of his employment or Section 5 of his agreement. With that being said, I will turn it over to Mr. Holzhauser. Mr. Holzhauser, if there's any words he would like to say about this, or we could have a conversation with council and ask your questions with regards to what you may or may not want to do going forward, and if so, our advice as to how to proceed.
Well, I can just say that this agreement has basically two provisions for termination of employment. One is...
I'm sorry, can we get a microphone for Mr. Holzhauser? And just so the council's aware, I think we will have information provided by Mr. Holzhauser and Mr. Salopoulos. We'll have council discussion and then we'll make the motion after that once we've come to a consensus on how to proceed.
The employment agreement, the city attorney has two provisions relative to termination of employment. One is without cause, which involves application of the maximum statutory severance pay under Florida law, which is 20 weeks total compensation. According to his employment agreement, he's employed at will, and that provision can be triggered as long as it's consistent with the charter in terms of the process within, at will to terminate employment if that's the direction the council wants to go. There's also a termination of employment with cause, and there's an extensive list of what constitutes cause under that. And that's something that involves proof of cause. Right now we have allegations, but allegations don't necessarily indicate proof. And for some of this to occur, we have to see what happens in terms of the progress of the criminal case and any other additional facts that we may learn, throughout this investigation. That does not require paying 20 weeks total compensation for termination. It calls for end of compensation as soon as the termination is effective. However, there are issues concerning trying to prove cause. Could be litigated. There's obviously issues that can arise out of litigation and the cost of that. You may all have read about Aaron Zahn challenging his termination for cause from the JEA, and that's involved in some hotly contested litigation right now. Currently, the city attorney is just on leave. He is out, just like anybody would be if they're out on vacation or for other personal reasons, and he has a bank of vacation and personal leave to use that he doesn't lose no matter what, and that's right now the situation we're in. He's out of work, he hasn't reported to work, and he's getting leave, and then there's some additional sick leave that he has that could carry him through employment through April 14th. And that is something that is an option that is set forth on your agenda to see whether we want to just keep him on the leave status using his own paid leave bank and see what happens in terms of the development of facts. Right now, again, we have allegations, but we don't have any resolution on exactly what those allegations mean. If the allegations are true, I think that, my opinion, is it would constitute cause for termination under the employment agreement. So, but right now we're not there. Any questions on what the employment agreement says?
Any questions from council? Mr. Nichols?
In the beginning it says that he has 171 hours, and that would seem to me that it's 4 weeks plus 11 hours, and it seems like that would get past April 14th to me.
Yeah, I think that's the calculation to get through that date, and I think that April 14th date is something we're looking at as a decision point if the council decides to go this route as opposed to one of the other routes I described.
I can add clarification to that.
Go ahead, Ms. Nelson, thank you.
I think the question that you're asking, Corey, is there are actually more hours than what it would require to get through April 14th, and that's correct. We included the April 14th in the day, the end of the day, because that is Mr. Ambrosio's next court date, and we felt like by that time that we might have more information in order for you all to make a better informed decision. There is actually enough sick leave that if we kept him on the payroll would go through 4/21, through April 21. However, sick leave is not normally paid out for any reason other than retirement. So if you all wish to extend him the opportunity to take sick leave, we are asking for council authorization for that.
What was his PTO given through?
Pardon me?
What was his PTO given through? Is the PTO the 171? Or
And the
is
total
there?
balance, and he's got 8 hours of personal leave, he's got 60 hours of vacation, and 102 hours of sick leave. So a total of 171 would take him from, excuse me, from yesterday, which was the first day that he was out, through April 21st.
Thank you.
Any other questions from council? Any discussion on how we'd like to proceed?
I'd like to ask a question, Mr. Hauser.
Go ahead, Mr. Stokes.
On section 5B, could you just go over termination, a possible termination with cause based on the act? There is some conviction, but there's also just the act of it written in there, and just wanted to get some clarification.
Yeah, there's some, obviously, if he's convicted, pleads no contest to, or proceeds with withheld adjudication, that constitutes cause under the degree court, not there yet. And then there's some other provisions that talk about gross misfeasance or malfeasance, deliberate violation or disregard of the standards of behavior. There's a number of things there that I think that potentially could be grounds for termination, but they have to be proved as well. And of course, there's an argument with respect to a lot of behavior issues that if they're not work-related, they're not relevant. So, you've got that issue to pop up if, we go forward with this. And, anything could come under gross insubordination or misconduct can be grounds for termination too. That hadn't happened yet either. So, we don't have enough facts provable right now to say there's grounds for termination right now. Now, the council could decide to do that and hope that proof comes in, but you just never know.
Mr. Nichols?
How does the 30-day notice that City Manager Stepopoulos brought up as a change to the employment status if it's a termination for cause?
Well, yeah, I just saw that too. I don't think it is just for termination for cause. It just reflects termination. First of all, it takes a supermajority vote of 5 council members to remove the city attorney from office. But before that happens, the city attorney would need a resolution passed by a majority, just 4 of the council, that outlines the reasons for termination, and then there's a 30-day period to respond to that and have a hearing to then have the council act on the resolution. So, and the charter says that during that time frame, the individual is paid. So, it's just a procedural hurdle if termination is the decision. And the first thing that would have to happen is city manager would be asked to draft a resolution that would be considered by the council to vote on, trigger the process.
Mr. Jansen?
So if a decision was made to terminate with cause, in essence, he would have to have either an acquittal or the case being dropped in order to reverse that with cause.
Well, if he was, the case was dropped, there are other grounds in here that could apply if we had proof. But we don't have the proof right now. But that's one of the risks of if we're relying on thinking that he's going to be convicted or plead nolo or something like that, and that doesn't happen, then we don't have that as grounds for cause termination.
Yeah, it seems to me there's limited options. That's all right now.
And one other thing, if for some reason the Florida bar gets involved and thinks he should be disbarred based on what's happened, his loss of a license is another grounds for termination. But that can take months and months. And, we just can't predict that's going to be the case at this point in time.
Ms. Dumont?
Thank you. I don't have a question. I just like to get going on the discussion. I don't think we have, I think we put the city at risk for termination at this phase. It's been 2 days. And we're still uncovering facts. And thank you for mentioning the Aaron Zahn case. That is something that we don't want to have to deal with. I think we are in a better situation by putting Mr. Ambrosio on leave, letting facts be gathered, be it by us or most likely through the court system, and then revisit this after his first court date on the April 14th, so the 15th or sometime shortly thereafter, but before the 21st, before his PTO runs out. So I would put forth that would, I think, be the best option for the city and its citizens financially, because he could be facing a lawsuit. And we don't have the facts that are needed to be able to justify cause at this moment in time.
Mr. Jansen?
Yeah, I know you mentioned that there's allegations, but I feel that we've gone a little bit further than allegations. When there's arrest based on probable cause, that's got to be supported by evidence. I don't think that it stands on mere allegation. And we may not know the totality of the circumstances, but we know there was an arrest made, and that's got to be based on probable cause, and that's held up at first appearance.
Mr. Nichols?
From a labor perspective, do you have a recommendation that you could give the council? And then just one comment to Councilwoman Dumont. I believe his PTO he's got 60 hours, so I think that takes him through the end of next week, which goes up the time frame. We have to make a decision about allowing him to use sick leave in order to get past that time.
For some reason charges are dropped, then it's up to us to develop evidence to prove one of the areas of misconduct independently, rather than waiting on the criminal justice system to act. And that can be problematic when you're talking about the only witness being a underage female.
Do we have the ability to, per his contract, to have him on administrative leave without pay after he uses his PTO?
That's something that we could address. I think that typically these things are done administratively with pay so as not to trigger a due process hearing, because taking pay away would then again give him due process rights to challenge that. We haven't gotten anything from his side of the story at this point yet, other than what's reported in the news.
But we wouldn't have to make a decision of an administrative leave with or without pay at this time. We can do it at the prior to the conclusion of the PTO.
It just seems to me to be premature to make any decision on taking adverse employment action based on the proof or the availability of proof we have right now.
Mr. Jansen?
Have you had an opportunity to read the arrest document?
I have read the arrest report, the redacted version of it.
Right. Okay. That's all.
And if what's in there is true, there's cause for termination. No doubt about that.
Ms. Golding?
I just
just want to bring up, bring up some information. Some of us who were on the council and over the last couple of years, we approved a code of ethics, and that code of ethics is for all public officials, which includes us, as well as the appointed public officials. And Section C of that code of ethics states the professional and personal conduct of public officials shall be above reproach and avoid even the appearance of impropriety. I just want to bring that up because that is, the code of ethics was something that we passed because we feel that the public trust is really important. We need the public to have trust in our government, and so I just want us to keep this in mind because we have all signed this code of ethics. We approved it because that public trust is important to us. So I just want to put that out there because I think it's important that we keep this in mind as we go through this process. Because I'm concerned that the public trust has been damaged at this point.
Do not have any more lights? Any other comments? I would have to agree that recovering public trust at this point would be next to impossible. I don't think anybody would disagree with that. I think the now is what's the right path forward for the best for our city and for our citizens. So I tend to agree with Ms. Dumont that we recognize that this is hot off the presses, as you will, and that buys us a little time for a little more information to develop, for us to get organized, for us to formally engage council to advise us through this process. And the PTO is something that we would pay anyway. So I think that's where I'm leaning at this point, but I don't feel a strong push one way or the other. Is there any consensus on how we want to proceed at this point so we can get a motion and a vote? Mr. Nichols?
I would agree. I guess the motion, do we need to refer to administrative leave as well within the motion that we're looking at? I mean, I agree that potential termination should be delayed at this time, and we just want to make sure that he is on administrative leave and that he's not coming here. And
right. I think to be clear, it would be helpful to refer to administrative leave and the fact that we are authorizing, use of accrued leave, including sick leave on the books. Those are two important components. And like you said, if he's on administrative leave, that gives us a little bit more of the opportunity to restrict his activity when it comes to city facilities and city employees. Okay. And the date, in the requested action, we said through April 14th. It doesn't have to stop at April 14th. If you want to authorize it through the end of that week, or if you want to authorize it through the end of where his sick leave would run out, which is April 22nd. It's up to the council as to how much time you would like to extend that.
I want to see if there's any strong objection to this path forward. I think it's going to be important for us to be somewhat on the same page as a body. Mr. Jansen?
I walked in here feeling that it should be terminate employment agreement with cause. I understand the position that you have. I would feel that meeting in the middle would be terminate the employment agreement without cause and taking that 20 weeks in consideration. That's my position on it. But I think that a move to terminate is important at this point for the city's trust.
Mr. Meza?
I was going to say, let's move forward with just paying the city attorney for the hours that he worked on. But I know the public trust has been lost, and I do have to agree with Mr. John Johnson on what he just talked about.
Mr. Stokes?
It is in my opinion that this has been a violation of the standards of the behavior to which the city has the right to expect of a city attorney. And just based on the arrest in itself, that we should expect higher out of our city attorney for to put himself in any situation that could involve legal action. And that goes for a lot of city employees and all of us as well. That's our code of ethics. So it's in my opinion that we should consider termination without or with cause.
Mr. Nichols?
Well, I was very shocked and very disappointed with this whole situation, but my concern with termination is the exposure of 20 weeks of pay, which in my estimates is probably about $160,000, $170,000.
Actually, it is $89,000.
$89,000 if that we would have to pay per his contract. If we allow the administrative, if we put him on administrative leave, with the knowledge that we're going to revisit this when we have more information, and we understand that unless something drastic changes and the whole story is incorrect, that termination is pending. I believe that the exposure to the city financially is something that we should consider. So in addition to the $89,000 with termination without cause, we would still have to pay him the 171 hours. Probably
Not
the
the
PTO.
sick leave. If I may, I do have cost analysis for each of the three options that we have.
That would be great. Thank you. But I'll continue. But from a financial exposure position of the city and the fact that he will not be, if he's on administrative leave, will be precluded from being involved. And I believe the city has taken any keys, his cell phone, anything else that would allow even access to his email, to the server. I believe everything has been removed. So action appears to me that the city has shown significant action in the course that we're taking, and that the taxpayers of Jacksonville Beach would agree that the exposure of the expenditure of $100,000 for waiting a week or two on additional information is would make sense to them, and that if we terminate it, and this does turn out to be something happens and the case gets dropped, then we are really we are very open to litigation. So that's kind of where I am.
Ms. Dumont?
Thank you. I am in agreement with Mr. Nichols. The difference is $68,111, and I would like to see that money utilized in a way that would benefit the citizens. Not that dealing with what it doesn't benefit the citizens. We need to, labor law is one of those, it's a sticky issue, and this one ends up being a little bit more so because it wasn't a work-related aspect. And so the burden of proof is going to be that much more difficult on the city's behalf versus if it was something done during time in the city. I still am I'm comfortable with waiting a couple weeks, letting the facts be gathered. I don't disagree with what everybody has said here, but I'm looking at it from risk exposure for the citizens and the tax dollars on how to move forward in the most expeditious way possible. And I see that as waiting until after that, his first court date, regrouping on the 15th or the 16th, the Thursday or the Friday, figuring out what, now that we have more information, where do we want to go? Should we go with termination with cause, termination without cause, or continue on his administrative leave?
Mr. Jansen?
I understand that 2-week time frame. However, I don't know that there's a whole lot of facts that will be presented to us based on my experience in a 2-week time frame as far as where his direction in this case is going to go. In fact, I would submit to you it's probably going to be years, or if not, a significant amount of months. And I don't want to put a price tag on moving forward with a termination, though it seems to be that the dollars is a concern. Excuse me, is a concern. I don't think they rise to that significant of amount that we should make a decision on termination.
Mr. Nichols?
I guess we wouldn't extend it. I think the April 14th date is his next hearing. I think he might plead guilty at that time. We would have the possibility of reducing the liability knowing, and we could move forward with termination for cause at that time. That's the only, I would not want to delay this past that time. I think that's when we were going to get significant possibility of getting significant information, and that he would make a plea at that time. If he pleads not guilty, then we would have to reconsider. I would say that we would reconsider it at that time.
Mr. Mason?
If we were to terminate him, how exposed would we be if, let's say, charges are dropped and there was false allegations and we terminated him in 2 weeks? How bad are we exposed to a lawsuit?
Well, it gives rise to the potential that we would have to prove cause for termination under the employment agreement. And that is going to require us to develop evidence to present to a fact finder that he did what he's alleged to have done, or at least part of what he's alleged to have done. And again, that becomes problematic when you're talking about third-party witnesses. You have to rely on them to present your case, where in this case, the only first-hand witness, other than the city attorney, is a underage person. But these things can go different directions. I talked to one of my partners who was a prosecutor in Jacksonville, and he said that he's seen these cases where obviously the person's guilty and they're convicted, and he's also seen it where the accuser has just said that they made it up because they were mad at somebody. And we don't know how it's going to come out. We may not know by April 14th, but I think some time gives us an ability to learn some more facts and maybe have circumstances arise where we can resolve it before it goes further.
Thank you. Ms. Golding?
I guess my only comment would be is if we terminate without cause, or question I should say, if we terminate without cause, are we legally exposed?
I don't think we're legally exposed if we go through the charter process of effecting the termination and pay out the $89,000 in severance pay under the contract. That's a relatively clean but also fairly expensive route to take. Politically, you have to decide whether you want to terminate somebody in this situation without cause.
Mr. Salvopoulos?
This is more a question for Mr. Holzhauser, just to maybe verify the statement I'm about to make. If the council were to give direction tonight that they would like to proceed on termination of the agreement in any way, shape, or form, either with or without cause, we would start the process of following what's defined in the charter of the 30-day notice, which would still take us beyond the April 14th arraignment date for the city attorney. So, and that was one of the things we wanted to clarify with regards to the memo. And correct me if I'm wrong, Mr. Holzhauser, but if direction was given, they wanted to terminate the agreement tonight, whether it's with cause or without cause, we would then enact the charter provision of having another special meeting where a resolution would be presented, and then there would be the 30-day wait period where the individual has the right to appeal in a hearing in front of the council. So even if we started that process, if that was your decision tonight, it would likely not be until next week that the special meeting would occur. And then at that point, you're looking somewhere around April 30th that you would actually have the ability to move forward with the termination of the agreement. Just wanted to make sure we're on the same page with the scheduling and why one of our recommendations is to consider waiting until the 14th, until after that arraignment date.
If we asked you to begin that process, do we have to state at that time with or without cause? Because that's the question to me at this time.
You would have to make that determination because it says that you have to set forth the reasons for the decision
Okay.
in the resolution. So if it's without cause, you don't have to say any reason other than we're electing to trigger the without cause termination provision of the agreement. And that's that. If it's for cause, you're going to have to set forth all the facts that you have to show that you have cause under the language of the contract to effect a for cause termination. And I didn't see anything in that charter amendment that distinguished between a cause and for cause termination. I think that probably whoever drafted it had in mind a for cause termination only, but that distinction is not in the charter language.
So we could conceivably hybrid this motion and have the administrative leave plus begin the resolution process with or without cause, because we're going to have more than 30 days at that point. Am I understanding that correctly?
If you move forward with a direction to staff to create a resolution and bring it back, we would need to know whether it is for cause or without cause, because the reasons for termination need to be stated in the resolution.
Right.
I would also specify that one of the things that Mr. Holzhauser has not had the privilege of seeing is the code of ethics that was established by council and adopted. So I think that we need to get him a copy to look at that as well and determine whether or not there are any actions or inactions that have occurred that would be considered violations of that document as well.
Yeah, although that would have to also then be, under the contract, it would have to be, the code of conduct or ethics is not incorporated by reference into the for cause provision. Now, there may be some language in the for cause provision we can say really tells us that the code of conduct does apply. So I think there is some language about proper behavior of a city attorney. So, we might be able to bootstrap that, but it's not that simple.
Mr. Mason?
Question, Mr. Popoulis. Obviously, assuming he bonded out, and I know he pled not guilty, have you guys had a chance to talk to him to get his perspective or anything?
No, I'm not aware of anyone having contact with him other than the Largo police officer that met him in Atlantic Beach to retrieve our materials. Otherwise, he has not had any contact with administration, myself or the deputy city manager, or any of the other department directors that I'm aware of.
For the record, I believe Mr. Staffopoulos meant Jacksonville Beach police officer, not Largo.
Oh. It's only been 2 years, sorry. Yes, Jacksonville Beach police officer.
Are you finished, Mr. Mason? Mr. Jansen?
So under action 1, the very first bullet point there, the use of the 171 hours, if we went along with that, then that 30-day window gets pushed beyond that, doesn't it? So that pushes us back into May.
That would be correct. If a decision were not made until April 14th or later, at that point in time, we would then need to start the clock of the resolution in the 30-day wait period. That is correct.
Mr. Stokes?
Would it be possible to take a 10-minute recess to get Mr. Holzhauser the code of ethics? Would he be able to review?
I would be glad to review it, but like I say, it by itself is not going to be dispositive because it's the contract language that we're looking at in terms of what would trigger for cause termination. So, it may be that we have an argument there that it's not clear cut because the code of ethics is not embodied in the cause provision, or a violation of the code of ethics is not one of the listed causes.
Would you not think that code of ethics is part of the standards of behavior? To which
Yeah,
we have?
that's what I said. We could argue that the standard of behavior reflects what's in the code of ethics, but that would be a subject of argument. It's just not as clean cut as it would be if you said violation of the code of ethics is one of the grounds for cause.
Mr. Nichols?
So if we decide to termination for cause, and we make a list at this time, and that's the list that is defined in this termination, if he ends up filing a lawsuit against us, are those the issues that, only the issues that we can use, because those are the ones we did? Or if additional information arises, let's say he pleads guilty at a later time, is found guilty, can we use those at that time, or only the list that we develop now?
Well, that's a good question.
Would
And
that be considered?
I think that what you do if you develop a list would say commission of a felony, and then if he's convicted, you would have the proof that occurred. So you wouldn't have to, I don't think separately say conviction of a felony, because that would be what you would put in your list. I mean, the way you do is you incorporate as much as you could in your list of what either is alleged to have happened or which you think will happen in the future based on the judicial proceeding. But if you leave something out that is material and not related to something, you probably are precluded from using that as grounds for cause termination later under that charter line.
Thank you.
I do not see any other lights on the board. Any other feedback, comments? Ultimately, if we do, if we chose tonight to terminate with or without cause, it would trigger the charter process of the resolution, which at that point we would need a supermajority. Am I correct?
You would need a simple majority.
Simple majority.
We would set a special meeting, probably for next week, to adopt the initial resolution as called for by charter. We would only need 4 members to adopt that initial resolution stipulating why the council is seeking removal from the position. The 30-day window would then occur with the ability for appeal. And after that 30-day window, a final hearing on the resolution would be heard, at which point a supermajority would be required. So simple majority to start the process, supermajority to end the process.
Thank you. Mr. Nichols?
So if we go down this process of termination beginning now, and either the resolution does not pass for a supermajority, would it fall back to him being on administrative leave? And it's between now and the time that the vote is taken for termination, the second one is on administrative leave from now.
There is a stipulation that the council may suspend the city attorney from duty after passage of the resolution, but must continue to pay the city attorney until the termination becomes effective, and so that would be 30 days. So either way, if you start the process, he would still be paid for at least the 30-day period until the resolution is passed, and then an additional 30 days have passed.
Mr. Stipp?
Sorry, this is also before you walk away. So even if we go option 1, which we're paying him for the hours worked and using leave, even if we go option 1 or terminate, we're still paying for at least through the 14th.
At least for 30 days. I believe the mayor pointed out that those 2 options were presented as if they're mutually exclusive. They really are not. We were working off of the contract language and not taking into account this 30-day wait period that the charter amendment requires. So you could effectively authorize us to go ahead and run out that leave, and then go ahead and make another motion regarding termination.
Mr. Nichols?
Karen, sorry. The point you brought up about suspension, so we would need to include that in any language if we were going to go the termination route at this time. If we were going to go the termination route, he would need to be, or is that automatically in his contract that it's automatic that he gets suspended?
You mean as a matter of motion, as a matter
Yes.
of form? I believe the motion would be to direct staff to come back with a resolution on a set date, and then we would follow the procedures that are defined in the charter for termination. which those procedures include suspension, the fact that we have to have a paid suspension for 30 days. So I don't know that that needs to be in the motion.
Okay. Thank you.
Ms. Dumont?
Thank you. So he's on, let's say we suspend him and we're doing the two lines together. We start the process for termination with cause, is what we're talking about here. And the charges get dropped. Is the vote tonight to move forward with the resolution binding our hands in any way while waiting to pass at least the initial majority vote before the supermajority vote? In other words, are we exposing the city to any risk if the charges were dropped? And
Are you saying if you pass the resolution and we start the 30-day clock and then circumstances change or new information comes in? Is that?
Well, I suppose what you could do if you're worried about proof of cause is just vote down the resolution at that point and go a different route. I mean, the other thing is that if you could decide we can gather enough evidence independently of the charges that we can proceed with cause on that. For instance, there may be something he admits to doing that's not felony, but falls within one of the other categories of cause that we can rely on to move forward, even though the charges are dropped.
okay, right, then I would like to make. Are you guys ready?
Can I let Mr. Nichols
Yeah,
make
go
a
ahead.
comment, and then we'll go back to you, Mr. Dumont. Go ahead, Mr. Nichols.
Back to that point, it's my understanding that he has, maybe not in court, but has admitted to supplying alcohol to a minor. Is that the case at this point in time? Does anybody?
Well, all I know is that what's in a police report is he can deny that he said that.
Okay, thank you. That's what
And
I'm
we've
looking
had
for.
that situation before where I said this, they must have heard it wrong.
Okay.
And just one question for you, Ms. Dumont, on your question about the resolution process. Were you talking about between the first and the second votes on the resolution, or were you talking between now and the first vote on the resolution?
Between now and the first and the second. So it would, like tonight, we would vote on staff starting the process. Next week, we would vote on the motion for a regular majority. And sometime after that, 30 days, we'd vote with the supermajority. I just want to make sure that by the time we get to that end piece, we have wiggle room to get out or vote it down without it coming back to bite us.
If I understand correctly, the resolution has to be passed before the 30-day clock starts.
The initial resolution would be passed by council, and it would state the reasons for termination, either with or without cause. And then there would be the 30-day clock, and then there would be the final vote on the same resolution. So I believe, Ms. Dumont, you're correct. When we get to the end of the 30-day window, if circumstances have changed, obviously a majority of council can vote the resolution down, and at that point, the city attorney is not terminated for cause.
But at that point, with the situation changing, vote that down, and you'd be able to make another motion to terminate without cause, and he would get another 30-day process, during which time he would be getting paid, not getting paid.
That'd be a question for Mr.
Yeah, I think he would be getting paid. What you might do is simply, do it in one proceeding. In other words, have the for-cause termination, and then say, absent this passing, we're going to go forward with termination without cause. In other words, maybe there's a way, and I haven't really studied this, and this is the first time today that I've seen this charter amendment, but it may be the way we could do them both in one document, get that 30-day, paid 30 days rolling, and then have the vote at the end of the day with a supermajority determine which route you're going to go. So you don't have to do it seriatim.
Right.
I don't.
I can see how the language could be done, but I just don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know legally, would they be decoupled in the language, and they would need, since it's a new, it's a new charge, for lack of a better term, does the employee then need an additional 30 days to try and address that? Although since it's without cause, I wouldn't see that there would be anything to address.
Yeah, it seems to me there would, if you vote it down, it would, I don't know that you'd have to start all over again for without cause termination. If you keep that option alive during that first process.
Okay, thank you.
But this is all, potentially political stuff, but I would think that, it's not that much more money. 30 days pay off on top of 20 weeks. It's 20 weeks you don't want to pay, but it seems to me that'd be very little to fight over, would be another 30 days pay.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Nichols?
So it would seem to me that it would be advantageous to move our second, if we are going to vote for termination this time, with or without cause, that we would move that second meeting to as close to 30 days as we could, to be able to get as much information between now and then. And so if we vote on the 29th day, I mean, we have to pay the 30 days anyway.
Yeah, I
That it seems like we would want to push that as much as we could.
You have to pay from the time the resolution passes, the first one, to the effective date of the termination,
Okay.
which has to be at least 30 days.
Right, but the longer we wait, the more information we could potentially get.
Ms. Dumont, did you want to make a motion?
Yes, okay, I would like to make a motion that we place Mr. Ambrosio on administrative leave, and to be paid through accrued personal vacation and sick leave. And while on administrative leave, that we also move forward with termination with cause.
Before we go to a second and further discussion, does that motion satisfy legal counsel and staff?
Maybe you could say, and direct the city manager to prepare a resolution and schedule a special meeting accordingly.
And directs the city manager to draft a resolution and schedule the meetings accordingly so we can finish the process.
What was that last part?
So we can finish the process.
Let's make sure.
Madam City Clerk, did you get that? Did you get the motion? Or you can play it back later. Just want to make sure we're square. Is there a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Discussion. Mr. Jansen.
I agree with it. I think we should take off that, the sick leave. We don't honor that now, and I don't think we should extend it, afford that to him.
Ms. Nelson?
For clarity for that, if you all decide not to allow the use of that accrued sick leave by the charter, we still have to pay during the time that he would be suspended after the resolution passes, which is a 30-day period. So the total cumulative amount of leave, including sick leave, would go through just about right at 30 days. Okay?
Mr. Nichols?
I just want to make sure we add in there that they're following the procedures that are listed in the charter.
Please strike to finish the process to amending it to after the setting the meetings and to follow the process in the charter.
Is that an amendment to your original motion?
Yes.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion on the amendment? Mr. Nichols?
Should we get it read back in full?
She's giving you a look.
I just want to make sure we have it right.
We're just voting on the actual amendment that Ms. Dumont just stated. Do you recall what you?
No,
This is just the amendment. Yes, sir.
I withdraw.
Okay.
I withdraw.
Thank you. Any other questions on the amendment to the original motion? Madam Clerk, can we get a roll call?
Councilmember Demond,
Yes.
Golding,
Yes.
Jansen,
Yes.
Mesa,
Yes.
Nichols,
Yes.
Stokes,
Yes.
Mayor Hoffman.
Yes, the amendment carries. Back to the original motion as amended. Are there any other comments? This would effectively place Mr. Ambrosio on administrative leave, spending down his PTO, sick time, etc., and direct the city staff to prepare a resolution to terminate with and without cause. Am I understanding that correctly? Are we all on the same page there?
Terminate with cause.
With cause? I thought we were going to do a parallel. No? Okay. I'm glad I asked. Any other questions on the motion? Oh, just do on.
Thank you. Not a question, just for clarification, doing the parallel administrative paid leave while a resolution for termination with cause. How I understood this to be was at the second vote of the termination with cause, if the situation is changed, we can change that to without cause at that day. And he's going to look into whether we have to wait an additional 30 days or not. That's how I understand it, and that's my intent on what I would vote.
Any other questions or comments from the council? Madam Clerk, can we get a roll call?
Councilmember Golding,
Yes.
Jansen,
Yes.
Mesa,
Yes.
Nichols,
Yes.
Stokes,
Yes.
Demond,
Yes.
Mayor Hoffman.
Yes, motion carries. Action item 2, the need to restrict the city attorney's access. Mr. Staphopoulos touched on that already a little bit, that computer, keys, phone, etc. have already been retained by city staff, and the next move will be to restrict his physical access to city property. Mr. Staphopoulos, do you want to fill us in there?
Yes, as I said earlier, this is very similar to what we do with other employees that may be placed on a leave status, where they are advised that they are not to come to their place of work or to have access to city buildings, city facilities, or city employees until directed to do so by their supervisor. As the city attorney does not report to the city manager, I do not have the authority to do that, but we would like the city council to grant the mayor authorization to send appropriate notice to the city attorney of these terms and conditions as we go through this process.
Thank you. Is there, on this one, I think we can go ahead and take the motion since this one is fairly straightforward. Mr. Nichols?
I move that we authorize the mayor to issue a formal written directive to the city attorney to refrain from accessing city property or facilities and contacting city employees until further notice from the mayor.
Is there a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Discussion, Ms. Dumont.
Thank you. I just had a question. I know that we do this normally for city employees. Is that for action taken on the job or off the job?
It can be for anything that jeopardizes their possible employment or an investigation that's being conducted.
Okay, thank you.
Any other comments or questions? Madam Clerk, can we get a roll call?
Councilmember Jansen,
Yes.
Mesa,
Yes.
Nichols,
Yes.
Stokes,
Yes.
Demond,
Yes.
Golding,
Yes.
Mayor Hoffman.
Yes, motion carries. Item 3, need for special legal counsel. Mr. Staphopoulos?
Yes, as we've indicated, this is a little bit of uncharted territory for us. We're not sure what we may or may not need for legal representation on this issue as we move forward over the ensuing weeks, at least 30-plus days. We would like the ability to find appropriate counsel, either an individual or a firm, to provide us that guidance and assistance through the process, and are seeking authorization from council for the city manager to enter into such an agreement.
Thank you. Can I get a motion?
Make a motion. I move that we authorize the city manager to enter into an agreement with a qualified attorney or firm for a limited special engagement to provide legal counsel to the city regarding matters related to the investigation and arrest of the city attorney.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion by council? Seeing none, Madam Clerk, can we get a roll call?
Councilmember Mesa,
Yes.
Nichols,
Yes.
Stokes,
Yes.
Demond,
Yes.
Golding,
Yes.
Jansen,
Yes.
Mayor Hoffman.
Yes, motion carries. Item 4, continuity of legal services. Mr. Staphopoulos?
Similar to the previous action, the city attorney, when position is filled adequately, covers a broad gamut of services to each of the departments within the organization. We do have some overflow services and contracts with other firms, but there may be some gaps that we have. Again, while we get through the process of what will happen with the city attorney, and then at some point thereafter determining how to fill a city attorney position going forward. We're seeking authorization for us to enter into an agreement or agreements to fill those gaps such that we can have continuity of services.
Thank you, Mr. Staphopoulos. Can we have a motion?
I move that we authorize the city manager as necessary to enter into an agreement or agreements with qualified attorneys or firms to provide legal counsel to the city regarding various ongoing city matters for a period of up to 6 months.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion from council? Mr. Mesa?
Question, now that we're moving forward on all of this, how long until we start looking for a new city attorney? Or are we still not sure where we're going to be?
I would defer to Mr. Holzhauser, but right now we still have someone filling that position.
Okay, I'm trying.
All I'm saying, it depends what happens. I mean,
Okay.
if it turns out that the termination for a cause is sustained, then you have to go out and search for a new attorney. If it's termination without cause, you still have to do the same thing. It's costing the 20 weeks. So it depends. The only way it wouldn't happen is if the facts come out and this turns out to be a complete fabrication. Maybe you do or maybe you don't make a change. I don't know. It depends on what happens.
Thank you.
Mr. Jansen?
So we could look at 6 months, we could make a decision at that time as to whether or not we want to go with an interim or, starting a new process or something like that. Is that correct?
It's phrased as up to 6 months, but the reality is we would hope to be able to start moving forward in a different direction before that time frame. As we've discussed tonight, the process that we're talking about is a minimum of 30 plus days, and there's a possibility of a minimum of 60 plus days depending on additional research that we do. So we're talking at least a 2-month window within which we will need some services, and then if there is a recruitment process, whether it be for a firm or individual after that date, that will take some time as well. That's why the 6 months is plugged in there, but depending on how things happen, this has been very fluid. It's only been 36 hours since a lot of this has happened, and a lot can happen in the next 36 hours as well.
Sure, and this action is going to be immediate. You're going to immediately start looking for...
Yeah, we're basically going to do an inventory of what services we have covered by existing contracts. We do have, you may remember just recently, we had an agreement come in front of council for Bell and Roper to provide some overflow services and some specificity with regards to land use issues. We also have Mr. Holzhauser, who provides us labor law. We have Mr. Shepard, who's providing us some services with regards to charter amendments. We have a bevy of other individuals that we're using. I hate to use that word, but we do have other agreements, so what we need to do is take a look at the expertise that each of them provide and see where we may have gaps or needs over the next 3 to 6 month window, and try to fill those gaps as best we can to make sure we don't have a hole in where something gets delayed for an unacceptable period of time.
Very good.
Mr. Nichols?
I just want to thank the city staff for moving so quickly on this. This is a unbelievably horrible situation that we got put in, and I just appreciate the whole city staff moving as quickly as they have to get us to a point where we can address this situation. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Nichols. I wanted to say as well that we're fortunate that we do have a second person in our current city attorney's office with our paralegal Elise. So she will help provide some continuity, and I think we're very fortunate in that. But there are some things that are going to have to take a back burner. We've been pretty ambitious with our agendas and the issues that we've been tackling. So we will keep moving forward with a purpose, and thankfully we do have a bevy of attorneys. I've also been contacted by 2 former city attorneys in the Beaches area that have offered their assistance and have been very gracious in their concern for our city and our plan of work going forward. Mr. Jansen?
I don't know if this really falls into our concern, but his workspace locally, I want to make sure that the city's protected as far as, was he doing any kind of searches on his computer or anything like that, that we're forensically taking a look at that, or we're protected in his personal workspace?
His computer and his cell phone are in custody.
Good deal. All right, thank you.
And I saw a thumbs up from Chief Smith. Any other comments on this item? Madam Clerk, can we get a roll call?
Councilmembers Nichols,
Yes.
Stokes,
Yes.
Demott,
Yes.
Golding,
Yes.
Jansen,
Yes.
Mesa,
Yes.
Mayor Hoffman.
Yes, motion carries. Thank you all, City Council and City staff, everyone in attendance and watching at home on YouTube for your attention to this matter, and appreciate your time.